Hello and welcome back to another week in new genre books. Thanks for stopping by. We're always glad to have you here. My name is Amelia, and from Locus magazine, I'm about to tell you the top new science fiction, fantasy, and horror books being published the week of June 6th, 2023. Please like and subscribe. You know how this works. I ask nicely, and then you have all the power in the world to make me happy. So much power you have in your hands, and all you have to do is hit a little button or two. I've got links for timing in the show notes if you want to skip to your favorite category, be it science fiction, fantasy, or horror. We separate books by category because we're trying to be organized here, even though the differences between science fiction, fantasy, and horror as far as content and themes are arguable. Starting with science fiction books this week, we have 5 science fiction titles being published. From the award-winning Leckie, who will also be our feature interview in the July issue of Locus, we saw Translation State out from Orbit US in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a far future science fiction novel in the ancillary/Imperial Radich universe. 3 people following very different mysteries end up embroiled in a political conflict that threatens interspecies coexistence in space, which everything's better in space. Another great showing, and while it helps a lot to have read the previous books, it stands on its own if you're willing to juggle some complex cultural ideas. From the review in Locus by Russell Letson, when the matriarch of the Author family finally dies, lifelong caretaker Ine finds herself not quite disinherited, as her aunts and cousins are, but displaced. Nearly 60 and no career, no friends, no lovers, no marital partners, no children, and with no position in a completely reconfigured via bankruptcy and takeover family. Whatever her sex/gender, and it is never explicitly explained, and C is not so much unwelcome in the new dispensation as a leftover, an anomaly, who is nevertheless to be provided for. So the new nouveau riche matriarch arranges a sinecure diplomatic position that amounts to an invitation for Ine to make herself scarce, to travel and maybe look into an old puzzle if you feel like it. It's a make-work project to locate a fugitive for the Radchai translator's office, a 200-year-old cold case that no one, other perhaps than the translators, expects to go anywhere. But after decades of looking after her ill-tempered dictatorial grandmaman, Ine tends to take her duties seriously, even if it means leaving home for the first time, seeing far worlds and mixing with all manner of strangers. From John Shirley, who among many other things was the screenplay writer on the movie The Crow, we saw Suborbital 7 out from Titan Books UK in trade paperback and ebook. This is a science fiction novel. A routine rescue mission leaves a team of US soldiers, rescued hostages, and a prisoner trapped above Earth in a suborbital craft in a cinematic near-future thriller. From David Weber and Jacob Hollow, we saw The Welltall File out from Baen in hardcover and ebook. This is a science fiction mystery novel in the Gordian Division universe. The Welltall Tournament's professional VR games were supposed to be a symbol of cooperation between SysGov and its militaristic neighbor, the Admin. But that was before star admin player Ellie Sacco received a death threat written in blood next to a copy of her own severed head. Gotta love when those nascent technologies like 3D meat printing are used for nefarious means. The admin department of temporal investigation swiftly seizes control of the crime scene, and the tournament transforms into a flashpoint of charged politics and conflicting jurisdictions. Weber is the best-selling author of the Honor Harrington books, among others, and Hollow is a co-author on a number of other books in this series. From Kristy Acevedo, we saw The Warning out from Sourcebooks Fire in trade paperback and ebook. This is a young adult dystopian science fiction novel, the first in a duology. Quick pedantic word from me, the word dystopia comes from the Greek words for bad and place, and Merriam-Webster says it means an imagined world or society in which people lead wretched, dehumanized, fearful lives. Mysterious portals appear around the world, with holograms warning that a comet is going to collide with Earth. Go into the portal, or stay on a doomed planet. How doomed is it? The Warning was a finalist for the Philip K. Dick Science Fiction Award. From M. Hendrix, we saw The Chaperone out from Sourcebooks Fire in hardcover, trade paperback, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult dystopian science fiction novel set in a new America where girls must have chaperones at all times until marriage. Stella's new chaperone shows her a different way of life, and Stella starts questioning her world. This is a debut novel. Next up, horror. We have 3 titles in horror this week. From Charles Sewell, we saw The Endless Vessel out from Harper Perennial in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a near-future dystopian thriller novel. During a plague of incurable depression, and since when does depression ever feel curable anyway? Scientist Lily Barnes finds a mysterious device that might help, but while investigating, ends up traveling through time and space, meeting loved ones past and present. Brad Meltzer, New York Times bestselling author of The Inner Circle, said this: "The Oracle Year is about knowing the future and what you do with that knowledge." From C.J. Leede, we saw Maeve Fly out from Nightfire in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a horror novel. By day, Maeve Fly works at the happiest place on earth as every child's favorite ice princess. By the neon night glow of the Sunset Strip, Maeve haunts the dive bars with a drink in one hand and a book in the other. When Gideon Green, her best friend's brother, moves to town, he awakens something dangerous within her, and the world she knows suddenly shifts beneath her feet. Stephen Graham Jones, New York Times bestselling author of The Only Good Indians, says, "This is gory and brutal and beautiful and painful and terrifying and a pure delight." From Craig Russell, we saw The Devil's Playground out from Constable in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a historical horror novel about a 1920s film rumored to be cursed, and a 1960s journalist who hunts for the last copy. Jeffrey Deaver, the author of The Bone Collector, said, "Playground is a guaranteed one-sitting read, and how can you resist a novel about the scariest movie of all time?" Next up, fantasy. We have 9 titles this week. From Gregory Frost, we saw Rhymer out from Bain in hardcover and ebook. This is an epic fantasy novel, the first in a trilogy about Thomas the Rhymer, the 12th century Scottish balladeer who fights through time against aliens called elves. Thomas the Rhymer has been known by many names over time: Tam Lin, Robin Hood, and numerous other incarnations reaching into the present. But at his heart, he is still true Thomas, one man doing all he can to save us from a powerful foe. From Lisa Tuttle, we saw The Curious Affair of the Missing Mummies out from Joe Fletcher in trade paperback and ebook. This is a fantasy mystery novel. Miss Lane is puzzled by Jasper Jefferson's interest in what seems like a very minor theft, possibly even a prank, from the storerooms at the British Museum. But London in the 1890s is rife with secret organizations, cults, and individuals eager to acquire some of the legendary magic of ancient Egypt. The deeper the two detectives dig, the more hidden crimes they uncover, and the higher the death toll mounts. And at the center of it all is the mystery mummy recently acquired by the museum. Gotta love a mystery mummy. From Michael Moorcock, we saw The Woods of Arcady out from Tor in hardcover and ebook. This is an autobiographical / historical / fantasy novel. A wild desert crossing, a secret island paradise, a hidden underground civilization, plus London and Paris. The multiverse expands as pulp adventure mixes with a sort of memoir in the 2nd volume of the Sanctuary of the White Friars series. New York Times bestselling author Brandon Sanderson said of Moorcock's work, "I owe a lot to Moorcock, as does fantasy at large. If you haven't read his books, you're missing something grand." From Brendan Shay Basham, we saw Swim Home to the Vanished out from Harper in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a literary fantasy / magical realism novel based on Dene lore. After the death of his brother, a grief-stricken young man seeks refuge and oblivion in a secluded fishing village dominated by a family of Brujas in this haunting debut novel. The author is a recipient of Poetry Northwest's inaugural James Welch Prize for Indigenous Writers, the UCross Foundation's first Native American Literary Award, and fellowships from the Truman Capote Trust, Writing by Writers, and Tin House. From Dorothy Tse, we saw Owlish out from Grey Wolf Press in trade paperback and ebook. This is a fantasy novel / fable. In the mountainous city of Nevers, there lives a professor of literature called Q. He has a dull marriage and a lackluster career, but also a scrumptious collection of antique dolls locked away in his cupboard. And soon, Q lands his crowning acquisition, a music box ballerina named Alice, who tantalizingly springs to life. Dorothy Tse is a Hong Kong writer who has received the Hong Kong Book Prize, the Hong Kong Biennial Award for Chinese Literature, and Taiwan's Unitas New Fiction Writers Award. From Jeremy P. Bushnell, we saw Relentless Melt, out from Melville House in trade paperback and ebook. This is a supernatural mystery novel. The year is 1909, and Artie Quick, an ambitious, unorthodox, and inquisitive young Bostonian, wants to learn about crime. By day, she holds down a job as a salesgirl in women's accessories at Filene's. By night, she disguises herself as a man to pursue studies in criminal investigation at the YMCA's Evening Institute for Younger Men. And I really thought that was going somewhere else. Learning about crime, I mean. There's no substitute to learning by doing. From Henry Hoke, we saw Open Throat, out from MCD in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a fantasy novel of Los Angeles, climate change, existential angst, and survival, narrated by a queer mountain lion living in the drought-devastated Hollywood Hills, protecting homeless people and meditating on the complexities of gender identity until fire sends them into the city of LA. From Kristy McManus, we saw Our Vengeful Souls, out from Camcat Books in hardcover, trade paperback, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult fantasy novel, a prequel to The Little Mermaid, with elements of Greek mythology. From the author's Twitter, Our Vengeful Souls is a story of a cursed mermaid seeking revenge on the brother who betrayed her while fighting to protect her secrets and her life in the realm of Atlantis. When magical mermaid Saria saves her little sister and overshadows her brother and the sea's rightful heir, Triton, the position of next ruler of the sea is in question. Determined to keep his throne, Triton curses Saria, transforming her into a human and stripping her of her magic. Banishing her from their underwater kingdom, he gives her a final warning. If you should ever return, you will become a monster. From Jenny Elder Moak, we saw A Spark in the Cinders, out from Hyperion in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult fantasy novel. The story has reached its happily ever after. The peasant girl has married her prince and become queen. All is well in the kingdom, but for Aralyn, the princess stepsister, the story is only just beginning. We have one art book this week. From 3D Total Publishing, we saw Sketching from the Imagination, Character Concepts, out in trade paperback. This follows the success of previous titles in this popular series and showcases the incredible character work of 50 artists and illustrators. Chosen especially for this book, these artists from around the globe take inspiration from folklore, myths, modern stories, and sometimes real life as a basis for their imaginative work. Next up, collections, we have 3 titles this week. From Dilman Dila, we saw Where Rivers Go to Die, out from Rosarium Publishing in trade paperback. This is a collection of 8 stories. A young teen, haunted by the ghost of his father, takes it upon himself to save his brother and his people from a warlord's marauding army. A frustrated detective is driven to the brink, confronting the vengeful spirit killing grooms on their wedding night. What happens when British colonials find Martians in Africa? A brash warrior battles his elders and ancient horrors in order to secure paradise for his people, or an exiled Abiba is stolen away to find his true destiny. From the review in Locus by Eugene Bacon, I can almost see how Dila leverages his experience working in film to craft his prose, in his approach to plot, characterization, structure, and tension in his stories. The intense, cross-genre assortment of stories collected here blends African spirituality with horror, the fantastical, and technology in war-torn countries filled with wanton rape and murder, families and children in ruins, red rivers spitting corpses in swamps as streets bleed, homes burned, dreams turned to ash, and misery flowed in the veins of the people. From Hanna, Alkaf, and Margaret Owen, we saw The Grimoire of Grave Fates, out from Delacorte in hardcover, ebook, and audio. This is a young adult, multi-author collaborative novel project with 18 authors. A professor has been murdered, and 18 students race to find out who did it. From J. Ashley Smith, we saw The Measure of Sorrow, out from Meerkat Press in trade paperback and ebook. This is a collection of 10 dark stories, 4 new, including the title novella. Shirley Jackson award-winning author J. Ashley Smith's stories include a father who struggles to relate to his estranged children in a post-bushfire wilderness, an artist who records her last days in conversation with her unborn child, and a brother and sister who are abandoned to the manifestations of their uncle's insanity. This is the author's first collection. That wraps up this week. Thanks for spending some time with us. At Locus, we want to tell you everything relevant that's happening in the science fiction, fantasy, horror publishing space. We appreciate your eyes and ears and your likes and subscribes. Please do subscribe and turn notifications on so you know about this video when it goes up every week. The magazine and YouTube channel are a labor of love. We are at Locus Mag or at Locus Magazine on most platforms. You can read more about the science fiction, fantasy, and horror field over at www.locusmag.com or support us on our Patreon. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Come back and see us again soon, and we'll be here next week with more new books.